أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن محمدا صلى الله عليه وسلم عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. قال سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن ربكم الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض في 6 أيام ثم استوى على الأرض صدق الله العظيم وصدق على رسوله النبي الكريم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وأتباعه وأوليائك وعلمائك وشهدائك وبارك وسلم صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم. In Allah's name, the most merciful and compassionate. Allah Azza wa Jal has our deepest gratitude and devotion. We recognize His magnificence and turn to Him for guidance, sustenance, and forgiveness. We seek His protection from the evil within us, from the evil around us, and the evil within our actions. When Allah guides someone, no power in the universe can mislead them. When Allah misleads one, no one can bring them back to the correct path to guidance. I bear witness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only deity worthy of worship, and I recognize Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam as His devoted servant and messenger. An abundance of durood and salawat upon the best of creation, the crown of creation, the jewel of creation, Nabiya Kareem Rahmatan lil Alameen, our Master Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, his noble family, his blessed companions, and the honorable wives. I greet all ulama, elderly, and youth, those present and those watching via social media with the peace and blessings of Salamualaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In Surah Al-Araf, ayat 54, it says, Indeed, your Lord is Allah, who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Then, in the manner befitting His Majesty, ascended the throne. This ayah raises the question on how is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala above the throne. And this will be the discussion at hand today. However, before we can answer this question, we must understand a few concepts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. The first thing we must understand is what ma'rifah is. Every person's first obligation is to understand that Allah Azza wa Jal and the knowledge of Him is only attained through His attributes because of how they are apparent to us in this dunya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has veiled insan, except the chosen ones, from understanding His true divine reality. His existence and all that we know of Him, we know due to what of Him is apparent through His creation and the Quran. Another thing we must understand is that He is nothing like His creation. This is why whatever we can try to comprehend and rationalize with the figment of our imagination about His divine reality originates within ourselves, and therefore Allah is dissimilar to. Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala an said, the inability to comprehend Allah's essence is comprehension. And Sayyidina Ali radiyallahu ta'ala an added to it, and to inquire about the secret of the reality of the divine essence is polytheism. Thus we understand that true monotheism, true tawheed, is an understanding that we cannot understand Allah's divine essence. This concept is one of the hardest concepts for people to understand. We must understand and affirm that there is no essence like His essence. No name, no attribute, no act that is similar to His name, His attributes, and acts. Now, if you truly understand Allah's dissimilarity to His creation, you will understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have limits and boundaries like we do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of everything. And obviously, He would not be bound to His own creation. And of the creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, time, space, and direction are also creation. So we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have these boundaries and limitations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from the boundaries of time and space. He's azali and abadi, the pre-eternal and the everlasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is far too exalted to be contained by a place and to be delimited by time. And a lot of people do not understand the concept of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being free from place, especially people from the South Asian community. And you will often hear them in conversations, and they will say, Ayn Allah, where is Allah? Allah kahan hai? And out of jahiliyyah, they will answer, Allah fi kulli makan. Allah is everywhere. Allah har jagah hai. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not everywhere. Rather, it is His knowledge that is everywhere. It is His knowledge that encompasses everything. Indeed, He is As-Sami and Al-Basir, the all-hearing and the all-seeing. And indeed, these attributes also encompass everything. However, Allah in His essence is not everywhere. Why? Because everywhere is still a place, which is still part of the creation of Allah. And He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, is not bound by His creation, nor is He similar to it. Many misguided people use a certain hadith to try and argue against this concept. The hadith from Sahih Muslim goes, Muawiyah ibn al-Hakam reported, I said, O Messenger of Allah, I have a servant girl whom I slapped. That upset the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him. I said to him, shall I emancipate her? The Prophet said, bring her to me. Then she was brought, and the Prophet ﷺ said, where is Allah? He said, in heaven. The Prophet said, who am I? He said, you are the Messenger of Allah. The Prophet said, free her, for she is a believer. So people, specifically the pseudo-Salafi Wahhabi sect, take from this and try to ascribe direction and location from Allah. And if you take this without context, then yes, that is the conclusion you shall get. However, when you understand the context in which this is happening, then you realize that this does not at all contradict the aforementioned context. This slave girl was actually mute and deaf. And when communicated with, she answered by pointing upward. And the reason she did this was because all around her were idols. So the best way for her to indicate her tawheed was to point upward. Another opinion states that she was pointing upwards to indicate the shahada. And we understand the shahada, or us facing our hands upwards during dua, are not because that is the direction of Allah. Rather, it is just a qibla for us to make our dua to, or to indicate our tawheed towards. Same with the Kaaba. It is not that we are praying to the brick house. We are not believing that that is literally Allah's house. Rather, it is a focus point and direction for us to pray towards. But in our intent, it is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala we are praying to. All in all, ascribing any of these 6 cardinal directions or time and space to Allah is not the concept of Tawheed. And it is against the doctrine of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Now that you have understood this, the original topic will make a lot more sense. But before I get to Allah's establishment upon the throne, I would like to clear something up about the ayah from Surah Al-A'raf I mentioned earlier. One of the things I mentioned in this ayah is that Allah created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Throughout the bayan, I have been reminding you all that Allah is not bound by time and space. So how does this make sense? How did He create the heavens and the earth in 6 days if He isn't bound by time? And why did He create them in 6 days? When Allah is Almighty, He can say, be, and it will be. Kun fayakun, be, and it is. Well, the first thing we must understand is that the term here used for 6 days is sittati ayyamin, which directly does translate 6 days. However, in the context, it doesn't literally mean this. It does not refer to the cycle of the earth rotating 360 degrees while orbiting around the sun. By sittati ayyamin here, it refers to 6 time periods. Another example of the term day being implicative rather than literal is when we say Yawmul Qiyamah. Yawmul Qiyamah is not 24 hours long. As we know, Qiyamah is 50,000 years long. From Surah Al-Ma'arij, verse 4. We can understand through this that the term day here is not literal, rather it just implies 6 time periods. Now we also have to understand that here it does not mean it took Allah 6 days to create, or 6 time periods to create the heavens and the earth. As this would mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was bound by time. Instead, Allah is instantiating that it took 6 time periods for the heavens and earth to come into existence. Now, as to why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions 6 time periods is a very important thing for us to understand. Here, if you notice the isharatun nas, you will understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us to have sabr. He is teaching us that there is a process and system for everything. And this is the lesson to learn. To learn to have patience. Now, when it comes to the main topic, istiwa ala al-arsh, establishment and ascendance upon the throne. Imam al-Azam gave a very clear answer. Imam Abu Hanifa Numan bin Thabit radiyallahu ta'ala an says in his wasiyyah, had he been in a place and needing to sit and rest before creating the throne, then the question, where was Allah, would have applied to him, which is impossible. We assert that Allah is established upon the throne without His need, haja, nor settlement, istiqrar upon it. For He it is who preserves the throne, and other than it without needing any of it. This means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be associated with place, need, or physical settlement when it comes to establishment upon the throne. He radiallahu ta'ala an also said in his Fiqh al-Akbar, Allah has no limits nor any rivals. He who says, I do not know if my Lord is in the heavens or on the earth, is a disbeliever. And he who says, He is on the throne, and I do not know whether the throne is in the heaven or on the earth, is also a disbeliever. Imam Abu Mansur al-Maturidi explained this, and he said, the reason is that by such words, he suggests a place for Allah, and this is idolatry. From this, we understand that we have to be very careful with our words, as without even knowing, we can commit shirk by associating Allah with traits and limits of His creation. Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, radiyallahu ta'ala an, a 3rd Hijrah century scholar, jurist, and theologian, he also spoke about this matter. And he said in his Tafsir al-Tabari, Allah made Himself exalted over the heaven with the exaltation of sovereignty and power, not that of displacement and movement. And Imam Abu Mansur al-Baghdadi, a 4th century scholar, said something similar to this in his Usul al-Din. He said, the correct position, according to us, is the interpretation of the throne in this verse to mean sovereignty, al-mulk, as if he meant that the sovereignty has not been established for any but Him. This interpretation is taken from the saying of the Arabs, so and so's throne has toppled, as if he lost his power. He then reports the sayings of Sayyidina Ali, radiyallahu ta'ala an. And Sayyidina Ali said, Allah created the throne as an indication of His power, not for taking it as a place for Himself. This makes it pretty clear cut that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's istiwa, establishment upon the throne, is for indication of His power, sovereignty, and authority, rather than physical settlement. And Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni explained and clearly refuted these anthropomorphisms. And I will summarize his refutation. He explains that when the anthropomorphists use the ayah, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arshi istawa, from Surah Taha, the merciful is established upon the throne, we shall ask them the meaning of the fourth ayah of Surah Al-Hadid. And He is with you wheresoever you are. If they take this ayah with an external sense, then you contradict Allah's external sense in Him that was mentioned in the previous ayah. Basically, if they take the ayah from Surah Al-Hadid to mean that Allah is literally with us wherever we are, in person, bidhatihi, like they do for the throne, then it is contradictory with each other. Because if you bound Allah to space, then it raises the question, how is Allah established upon the throne and with us wherever we are at the same time? So we see that taking either ayah with an external sense, physical sense, therefore creates a contradiction in the Quran. And this is impossible. When you take the ayah in Surah Al-Hadid to mean that He is encompassing us with His knowledge, rather than being us literally, and not in the external sense, then you've actually used ta'wil, or allegorical interpretation, which they say they do. And it no longer is contradictory to His zat and sifat. Therefore, the same interpretation of understanding His establishment without applying a literal external sense is the interpretation that makes sense. Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi, a 6th century Hijrah scholar, explained in his Tafsir al-Karib about verse 93 from Surah An-Nisa. And he said that it is affirmed by this verse that all those in the heavens and the earth must come to Allah as a slave, as His slave. And since it is obligatory that Allah is clear of being a slave, He is therefore clear of being in a place or direction, or on the throne or the chair. He is reaffirming that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is upon the throne in an external sense, then this contradicts Allah's attribute of mukhallafatu lil hawad, His attribute of being dissimilar to anything in creation, being dissimilar to anything that has come into existence by accident. Sheikh Abdul Ghani al-Nabalusi, an 11th Hijrah century scholar's statement about this matter was, whosoever believes that Allah permeates the heavens and the earth, or that He is a body sitting upon the throne, is a disbeliever, even if he thinks he is a Muslim. Al-Dhahabi, a 7th century Hijrah scholar, along with Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, a juggernaut of the deen, the scholar who has been called the Mujaddid of the 8th century. Both of them rejected the concept and term of Allah Azza wa Jal being established on the throne externally and in person, bidhatihi. And finally, before I conclude for today, I will present one last point. Sulaiman ibn Abdullah ibn Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, the Wahhabi founder's grandson, even he declared anyone who used the term in person, bidhatihi, in relation to Allah being in one place, whether one place or an infinite number, is a disbeliever. He said, whosoever believes or says Allah is in person, bidhatihi, in every place or in one place, he is a disbeliever, kafir. It is obligatory to declare that Allah is distinct from His creation, established over His throne without modality or likeness or exemplarity. Allah was and there was no place. Then He created place and He is exalted as He was before He created. I hope everyone today learned more about Allah, His Zat and Sifat. Indeed, the only way to achieve success in this life and the Akhirah is by pleasing Allah. And the only way to do that is by getting close to Allah. And you cannot get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you cannot befriend somebody you don't know. So I stress upon everyone here today to learn about your Lord as much as possible. Inshallah, it will be the most beneficial for you. Ya Allah, we ask you to protect us from anything that would harm us. Ya Allah, we ask you to give aid to those Muslims who are in trouble all around the world. Ya Allah, help and protect the people of Palestine, the people of Gaza, the people of Sheikh Jarrah, the people of Rafah. Ya Allah, ease their pain and suffering. Ya Allah, allow the besieged to be helped. Ya Allah, open your doors of mercy, sustenance, and protection for all of the Muslims around the world in trouble. Ya Allah, protect us from the adhab during the end of time. Ya Allah, bless us all with husn al-khatimah. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Anything I have said in error is from me, and anything I have said which has benefited you is from Allah Azza wa Jal. JazakAllah for listening. Wa akhir ad-dawaya anil hamdulillah.